Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well still, and welcome to tonight's second half, and welcome to the 4th of July festivities. I, earlier today, shared a bonus with Laura Eisenhower, her great-grandfather, being President Eisenhower. Now I'm going to share a former military contractor, Steph. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go, and folks, they do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into tonight's second half, shall we? Alright guys, tonight I have a guest who just appeared a couple of days ago. A lot of you really enjoyed his experience that he had in Canada. Steph, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good today.
Glad to hear that. You and I, excuse me, you and I had been talking for a couple hours now, and
Wow.
I know, and we kind of wanted to touch bases on a couple of things. You do have some encounters or experiences with other things. We'll get to that eventually, but there's just some things that we wanted to clear the air on, and just talk about some of the things that you and I had been talking about during our private conversation too. First and foremost, I mislabeled your career, and I apologize for that. You are not a government contractor.
That is correct. I am a private contractor through a brokerage. I am not military. I've never served military. I've worked in tandem operations, but not under the control of. I just felt that was an important distinction, and it was just, we were having a fun time interacting, and it was an honest mistake or typo. So please bear with that.
Right. Now, just to kind of, because most people from movies and TV shows and stuff like that, people automatically assume that you have to be in the military to become a private contractor or mercenary or whatever you want to be called. That's not true, obviously.
No, that is not. There are many ways, deliberately and accidentally, to start down that path. My inset to this whole process, I prefer to keep to myself at this point. But I did not start out in some crazy training program. I went in as a liaison specialist due to some of the skills that I had before I went in, and they were applicable, and events aligned that is the path I've taken. So I just want that to be clear for everybody. I don't want to take away anything from the veterans or armed forces. I don't want to claim to be that. I was paid well, and I knew what I was getting into, and I had a lot of autonomy. Most of the soldiers, Marines, and all the armed forces, they are hardworking, and they have less aegis and control over their life, and they do a very hard job, and they take a heck of a lot of risk. I'm allowed to prep more. I'm allowed to have better gear. I'm allowed to say no. So I think that's an important distinction. I do not want to represent myself in any way as affiliated with the government. I have always worked for a private corporation or through a private entity, and I have no military training. I have had a lot of training, it would be on par or different and on par, but I just don't want that misrepresented, and I would not want to represent myself as somebody who had followed the path of the armed forces. So that's my giant wordy explanation of that.
All right, perfect. Now, you and I had been talking for a while, and we had some interesting conversations. You had sent me a photo, or not a photo, a drawing. And because I was talking to you last time we had talked about some of my interests of what I have been researching, and I not only am I narrating and interviewing people, but I'm also doing some deep dive research into some of these crazier cases, Tennessee being one, but the one that really has my most attention is the Tom Mezek case, the 82-year-old ex airborne ranger. And you had sent me a photo, or not a photo, a picture of a creature called a pulloff. And I think we had pretty interesting kind of conversation about that. Is that anything you want to start off with that, or how do you want to, what do you want to share is basically?
In a couple encounters, I've been educated, instructed, as well as had 2 different encounters with something referred to as a pull-off. Its designation would be beta delta, meaning bipedal and quadrupedal movement. These things are, I think, responsible for some of the, hairless, tall, monster, lanky sort of things that people have rarely seen, but I understand and I have observed that they do have an ability to disappear into the woods. And under observation of one of the corpses during a retrieval, it was observed to have chromatophores, and it was changing a lot of different colors, even though it had no sign of life, like a squid or octopus. And it has been my experience that other things defined as cryptids will be or have this chromatophore ability to actually camouflage. And I find that very interesting that very few people have seen that body form type, yet it is responsible in its attack method is to pull people off very quickly and disable them and disappear. So I think they are just as common as what people would call Bigfoot or Dogman, but I just don't think they're as observed. And they're probably a lot more responsible for predation than any of the other known cryptid encounters.
Okay. So, I had mentioned a creature called the look behind, and you said exactly, because it was something like a creature that just is like a hide behind. It hides behind a tree. It's very seldom seen, and it just takes you when it chooses. You don't have there's no probably no forewarning when these things come and take you.
Yes, they will be very quiet. They utilize van der Waal forces, which are the same forces that allow a gecko to crawl up glass. I mean, it's van der Waal. The last word is spelled W-A-A-L, if you'd like to look it up. It just does it's responsible for an almost fractal-like feathering of very, very minor fibril bits of skin on the bottom of a gecko's foot. And after this force is applied and allows them to climb, if they take their foot back up, you can test that area for phospholipids, which are spontaneously generated by that contact. And I do know some gamma groups that actually do test trees. And that does explain to me, and my own observations, why there are not giant claw marks and rip marks in a tree. You and I were talking about just the Jody guy talking about how it sounded like a squirrel or possum going up the tree, yet you had another experience that you have actually talked about where it sounded like a bulldozer ripping up the tree. Mm-hmm. So then if a gecko was truly able to exert every single bit of force, it's about 325 pounds of retention, but its body, skin, and bones would fail and let go before, the forces actually did fail. So if this creature, you mix the combination of the chromatophores and Van der Waal effect, it's a very deadly predator.
Yeah. So that explains, and just really quick, we were not singling out anything or saying anything about the case that Jody shared with us. It was pretty much how a large creature that large was able to go up a tree that quietly, and then there's no claw marks. It gives kind of an explanation of why and how these things are able to travel without being heard or seen. Which I thought was very interesting. And you've shared a lot with me just chatting. I'm going to turn the floor over to you and let you kind of lead the way, and I will interrupt as we go and ask questions, if that's all right.
Oh, that's fine. Yes, these creatures are, in my opinion, one of the deadliest and responsible for most of the abductions. There have been electrocytes that have been found that are in two bundles, paralleling the vertebra on the back, and very similar to an electric eel, electric fish. And these are sodium channels that are actually rapidly discharged or charged that can actually lead to a huge amount of electricity that's lethal. But the charge could be tuned similar to a taser. A taser is tuned to how our own nervous system's charge. So the pain may be there, but it mostly works by jamming every single signal to your body. A simple touch and grab with a combination of being able to adhere through Van der Waal effects and a discharge of electrocytes into the body and the ability to actually change the chromatophore to the surrounding environment would explain many disappearances. These things are very dangerous, and I believe responsible for many things. You wouldn't see anybody, you wouldn't hear anything, you couldn't scream, your lungs wouldn't work.
Yeah, you had also said that the electrocyte would cause or can cause amnesia and memory loss and stuff like that, which would explain people that are missing and randomly come out of the woods not knowing what had happened.
Yeah, well, I have no direct experience in that phenomena. I have had it posited to me by other contractors who have worked when they have found amnesia cases. And that is something that is highly worried about. There is specialist gear for dealing with this. They have an expanded neck armor as well as a ruff coming down the back that should protect them from anything getting the neck and causing any electrocution or stunning. Any of you out there have actually had a cryptid experience with the quote MIB that show up later, and if you see everybody that has a large amount of their skin covered and only the face visible, you are likely actually dealing with what is designated as a pulloff.
Okay. All right. Now, you kind of brought something up interesting, and I'm going to question you on it.
Okay.
You had said that the gear that you guys have is to protect. Now, when you go out into like a diamond mine or a precious earth metal mine, are you guys like warned of these things prior, or is it not spoken of? You know what I mean? Are you going blindly into this and then learning as you go?
The 1997 event in Waikiki was my first experience with what people would call cryptids at a job level. After that event, I was approached, since I had exposure to these creatures, about engaging in other jobs, and most of these jobs were periphery security. Was in a G2 class, meaning we usually ran the outside perimeter. G1 class was usually the people on the inside. We did have to be warned, but they usually just gave us cliffies, which are very limited amount of information that's laminate cards. It can actually be good complex information, or it can be some very basic protocol information and what to do. In a lot of cases, G1 group would actually communicate with us simply due to the fact that we needed to know things. And so over time, I picked up bits and pieces and had more encounters on peripheral operations to central operations. And that's just how you learn. If you don't vet out and you don't fail or don't break, then yeah, you can actually learn quite a bit. And this is all through private brokerage. On my aspect, if there are secret government labs or specialist super groups or whatever that other stuff is that people always talk about, I've never encountered them. I don't discount their existence, but I really don't know.
Right. Okay. All right. Now, you had said that to me that the rake is known as or would be considered a pull-off.
Yeah, I think the rakes are a smaller version of the pull-off. The pull-offs usually range 6 to 11 feet. I think these rakish creatures people talk about I have heard that they actually scale in size as opposed to have a growth development stage system. So I think we're looking at the same entity.
Okay. And it makes a lot of sense too with what you and I had talked about with like the van der Waal effect is like there's videos on YouTube that seem very credible, you know, that don't make any sense. These creatures, there's one where it's literally, it looks like it's hanging off the side of a tree like a gecko would. And then it's almost like it's just stuck there. And, you know, that's very interesting that I'd never thought about that. And I never really thought about, you know, the claw marks. There would, like you'd said, there would be claw marks all over the forest from these things just traveling up and down trees the way they do.
Now, I remember you telling me about somebody who had it sounded like a bulldozer going up and down the tree. Can you actually retell that one? I just think it might help.
It was a lady in, I believe, Montana, and her and her husband, they had kind of a ranch. They'd retired, so they built their dream home out in Montana, I believe. They had some forest or woods behind them, and on both sides, a beautiful clearing in front. They had some streams and stuff, and she had been walking her dog. She had a little dog, and she had kept hearing these whatever. She never saw exactly what it was. She'd only just hear it through, you know, when she'd walk her dog, and it steadily got worse and worse. They ended up moving. They ended up selling that home after the last experience. So she was outside. She ended up, it happened so many times that she ended up going outside with a pistol on her. And the last night before they had ended up selling their home, she went outside and she ran in and got her husband because it sounded like a bulldozer was plowing through the forest. They couldn't see anything. They could see the trees moving, like something was in the trees, but it was loud and terrifying for them. And they ended up selling their dream home and, you know, building a new one somewhere else where they felt safer in more of a populated area.
Yeah, I just wanted you to share that as a comparison to some of the stories we've heard versus a different version of something that would sound like without the ability to exert the forces on the tree to actually climb. So I think that one's pretty important to bring up and let people know that sort of motion and ability is possible. I think that will help people nuance other encounters that have been had or they have had, and also instill a degree of caution and understanding about the vectors of approach when you are hiking.
Yeah. Well, during this conversation, we were talking in the photo that you sent me was, I think this might be helpful with the Tom Mezek case. And, you know, as we were talking, I had said this to you, I started thinking about it, and it makes more sense that, you know, something like that could climb a tree silently and be responsible for Tom Mezek's disappearance. You know, the lack of sound. He had a rifle, he had a walkie-talkie, you know, and people are, you know, well, why didn't he shoot? Well, why didn't he call? And, you know, the ability to stun somebody stops all motion and all movement. So that would explain a lot. And then bring him up in the trees where he is not seen.
Yeah, an attuned electrical attack would actually not induce contraction like a raw electrical attack would, or a raw electrocution. Otherwise, the person would pull the finger, and if it was on the trigger, or there'd be something that could happen. So true paralysis induced by this sort of induction from an electrocyte is literally a freeze up, not a contraction spasm. So that's just an interesting bit of knowledge to differentiate.
Right. And one other thing that you had said to me, which kind of still, I could still, because, you know, I talk about Dogman encounters on this channel a lot. I mean, it's my name in the channel. And you had said that some of the pull-offs, and I'm going to struggle with some of the wording that you use, shared a caniform, and I believe I got that right. And
oh yeah, just say dog-like. That'll probably help.
Dog-like, and something else kind of way of looking. So it could still be classified, if somebody saw this creature, as a Dogman.
Yeah, there have been Beta Delta sort of Dogman sightings that have a lot of manifestations of these natural hunting abilities, such as Van der Waal effect or a stunning hit. One interesting thing I've noticed about the things referred to as Dogmen themselves is I do not think they have much eye mobility, due to the fact that in every single case, and in my experience, they always turn to look. And I don't think they have the ability to move the eyes very well. I've never heard much reports of that other than very minor movement in the eyes, but it would make sense if the eyes were locked. That would be very much like a hunting falcon or owl, especially in low light conditions. And I have heard many reports of their head movement versus body movement, where the body locks up and the head actually tracks sideways, whereas people say it looks at them and grins. I really think that's more of a locking of the eyes that are not very mobile.
Yeah, that would explain a lot. That, you know, the, like you just said, the turning of the head, the grin. Now, do you have I don't know, is there any kind of examples of anything that, you know, you could briefly kind of point out to us of what these pull-offs, you know, without getting too deep in? I know that you wanted to share a couple of things later on, but is there like something that you have heard from someone else of these things, like they hunt humans, it seems like?
In my opinion, and many people I've talked to that have encountered or tried to deal with these things and been unsuccessful in finding, is that I don't know if predate on humans is the right thing. I mean, their teeth are not, they're very blunt. They seem to be much more spade shovel design and crushing design, very similar to human jaws, as opposed to the over-toothed dog folk. And so it's strange. I think they have more of them have what looks like a removed or crushed in sinus cavity and very undeveloped eyes, no ears. So I don't know why they would be eating people, but they do seem to have a predilection for abducting people.
Right.
And if you notice, they're not really designed. I mean, they're designed strictly to disappear something almost. Like it's almost purpose built, but I don't think it is, or at least it's purpose adapted. And there are a lot of bodies found and they're not predated on. So.
Right. When I said hunted, I didn't mean like eating on them. I just meant like, like stalking for random unknown reasons.
Yeah.
It seems like, it's almost like a game for them.
Well, it almost seems to operate only off procedural memory, which is more of our deep ingrained memory. But it doesn't seem to go through a long-term memory. It's like these things have abilities to take short-term and immediate sensory memory and store it into sensory, whereas most humans would actually have short-term and sensory memory that lasts 5 seconds to 30 seconds. It appears, in my opinion, and a couple others, that they go right from short-term and sensory memory right down into procedural. So I wonder if these things work mostly on instinct. In my opinion, they do. I don't actually give them no concept of cunning or Machiavellianism or any like real major strategic thought. They are probably about the same intelligence of a snake. Maybe they have better execution of their abilities due to a more complex body structure. But it's really hard for me to say that they're intelligent in a way that we would find intelligent. It seems so reactionary, but also programmed, almost like beavers. Any beaver can make a dam, but that's just procedural memory that's in the body and in their body's construction. So I really think they're just following a preset behavior pattern that they're capable of adapting for ambush situations. Now, why they take them, I don't know.
Right.
And where they take them, I have no idea.
Now, and during any of your like jobs, I don't know what you guys call them.
Contracts, whatever, call it what you want.
Now, during any of your contracts, and you guys have guarded like mines and stuff like that, have you yourself stumbled upon any bodies?
Oh, yes, I have stumbled upon a lot of bodies.
Like what, with not human killed, but maybe just unexplained, kind of like what we were talking about with the pull-offs.
Oh, yeah. North in Tobago Hills, we actually found a group of indigenous workers that we were coming to resupply that were actually working on a bauxite deposit to pull out the aluminum and get the rare earth on the sides. When we came back up there to relieve and refill, that was a safe area for them, and nobody goes out in that area. It's almost on the edge of the Great Koryak sweep of the Sahara. We came back there and only found 2 people, and they were dead, quite dead, and it looked like it looked like their bodies had been randomly wrapped in burning rags and then taken back off. They had very strange spiraling burns across the body and all sorts of weird things, and the locals actually later on referred to it as a jinafrit, or kind of like a fire spirit, fire demon. It's just basically jinn, and a threat is a fire aspect. And the Saharan languages are a complex mix of Farsi, Nagari, and Arabic, so you're always going to get a different word no matter where you go. Okay. But they said they described the jinafrit as invisible shimmers of heat on the desert, which obviously goes back to the whole predator cloak reference everybody likes to use. But yeah, they were shimmers of heat on the desert that could grab people and cause burns. And we never found the other indigenous. And this Tobago Hills is mostly hard-packed rock scarp that comes out of the desert and really hard to track on, if at all. And we really didn't find any signs of anything. So the locals did attribute that to a invisible beast sometimes seen that caused burns all over the body. And that was one of the oddest ones I think I've run across as an aftermath that we could attribute to a variant or something completely different. I really don't have any other opinions on that. I've never encountered that ever again. I've heard variations all the way from Khartoum, Sudan to Al Fazir on the border of Chad about these things. Never heard them outside of that area, though. And you have to bear with me today, folks. I actually have a raging headache due to the pressure and weather. So I'm doing my best, and I'm enjoying doing this, but I might be a little unclear and not on the ball as I was last time. So please bear with me.
You're fine. I mean, if you want to take a break or anything, just let me know and we can stop for a little bit.
No, I'm cool to keep going, but I realize I'm a little bit slower today, and I'm just wanted people to know.
When you said Jin Lafrite or whatever, like I'm picking up on the word Jin, like DJINN, correct? Like the Jin, like as referred to as in, when people in Afghanistan and Iraq or whatever in the Middle East, how they refer to these creatures as jinn.
Oh, yeah. And we're in North Africa, so you still have a lot of the Arabic, Farsi, and some Nagari, and a lot of the Tuareg, stuff like that. So jinn is just kind of a catch-all term in that area for, it's the same as saying a spirit or a demon or anything like that.
And this cloaking, like how you referred to, like a heat, it sounded like almost like a heat mirage. It would be like, this like kind of shimmer. I've heard that, and I've talked about a couple of different cases on my channel, and I've heard that subscribers have commented on certain cases where people in North America, not in the Sierra, but with the almost like a predator-like cloaking ability in the woods of America, which is fascinating too, because we're talking about two different countries, two different worlds, two different climates, and it's almost like they're using the sunlight or their surroundings as like a cloaking ability, or whatever the electrocyte or whatever, possibly.
Oh, well, I think in this case, from many reports and actually my own encounters where I have observed this, there is a series of chromatophores and photophores, and each one of these chromatophores and photophores are topped by a hollow hair, similar in construction to a polar bear or Arctic foxes. This construction was originally noted on the bear and fox and emulated to make a better insulation back in the 80s, called hollow fill, an actual hollow fiber for our sleeping bags. In later research, it's derived a lot of further development and production of fiber optics. But what's very interesting is the creatures that stealth, as far as I am concerned and have observed, have the chromatophores and photophores at the base of each hair and can control these in a very, very practiced manner instinctually to change color and light intensity to match the background. And this actually has a precedent in the wild in squid and cuttlefish and also octopus. They use a chromatophore system, but they can match their background even when there is no visible light. So it's not a hard reach for me to say that these things actually have a cloaking ability, but it is not electromagnetic. It is not some sort of science or some sort of magic. It's literally a chromatophore, photophore way of camouflaging themselves that is highly, highly developed. In fact, I've heard of multiple cases where people talk about a Dogman or a Bigfoot having a sparkle to their body. And I really think that is just the photophores firing off at that moment and causing a little bit of sparkle on it. So
that would explain a lot with the, people that have seen a Bigfoot. You've got yourself a 9-foot, 700-pound squatch walk behind a 2-inch in diameter tree and disappear, and then people are like, maybe it went into a portal or something, and that would explain where it went. Well, it's still there. It's still watching you. And
I believe that explains the heat shimmer and all the other aspects to it too. I've observed that field in motion myself, and it looks like bad CGI, but it is quite real. But if it chooses its background appropriately, and keeps its motion to a minimal, then yeah, you can't see them until they actually move. And they're not very effective to be found on thermals. That's for sure. I mean, I have never picked up a good body heat signature anytime on any beta delta sort of entity with white hot and green hot, or even FLIRs or FLIRs. I mean, once you know it's there, you can dial in, but its outline's broken up too much by whatever it's doing. And they obviously would not be developed to counteract night vision from a mechanical object, but they could have developed a natural way of dealing with this to develop, spoof hyper night vision from another creature or predator, or even make it easier to sneak up on prey that developed a good night sight.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, it's just, I've had a blast talking to you about this stuff. It's very interesting, and it puts a lot into perspective. That, you know, just it gives a different kind of aspect to the theory, you know, and it almost sheds light on it, because, you know, here people could question, you know, well, how is this doing that, when yet it's in nature. We have, and you've mentioned it 2 times, we have squid that do it, in the ocean all the time. And why? Just because something's in the ocean doesn't, it could do. A land animal is capable of doing the same thing. So it's not too far fetched to think about that being on Earth.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you didn't interrupt me.
I was just saying, I find it odd that people go for the mystic route. And I mean, in all my experiences and everything I have learned myself, is there are biological functions that every single one of the cryptid encounters, from flying, burrowing, anything, actually has parallels and abilities that are manifest already in nature. I mean, they're vague and not as noticed, but they are well documented. And just because something occurs in a pelagic species deep down in the ocean does not mean that a land animal can't develop it. And for all we know, these are aberrant parts of evolution, and how they appear here, how they develop, is not really known, because other than a few takedowns among us, and I'm sure there have been takedowns among other groups, but that's where most of the data comes from. They're unique to see, and it's really fascinating. I don't have a mystic fear of them. They are very dangerous, regardless from everything. I've never encountered what people would call Bigfoot. Never in my life. They're called primiforms or semeiforms, primate or simian. I've never encountered one. Sure, they exist. I fully believe in them, but I've just never encountered that type. The encountered I type are caniform, ursiform, or dogman, bearmen, and other odder ones that I'll talk about later. But to me, they've always been incredibly dangerous, but very similar to a grizzly. Don't provoke them and hope for the best. That's the best thing to do if you're not out actively in an area dealing with an operation. The pulloffs, on the other hand, to me, don't resemble any animal. They just are a humanoid form that is very adept at taking things.
Now, would you consider the animal or the creature that you shared a couple of days ago, would you consider that a pull-off?
No. That thing seemed to just go on a one-way trajectory. I mean, I have no idea where it came from, but its actions were not in any way stealthy, procedurally thought out on a memory, and they were beyond instinctual. I mean, obviously I want to default to saying it was like a berserker, but it did show the ability to, it just didn't turn and run. It did drop down and assess the situation before it jumped at us, even if it was quick. So, but it was open territory, open terrain. Despite the fact that it sublimated off most of its non-skeletal system, it still did not strike me as a ambush or thought out predator. It really was just, I see it, I go get it. Pull-offs seem to be much more nuanced, or at least developed for their function, yet they don't demonstrate predation on the body. So to me, that's a mystery. Some people say that they steal the soul or essence, and I mean, bless their souls. I have no idea. I have no way to prove or disprove that. I just know from what I've seen that anything that has the ability to use a photophore chromatophore cloak hates fire. And if we're ever dealing with that, we use Dragon's Breath rounds to start, as long as they don't present an ignition issue in where we're at. But if you hit them with a Dragon's Breath round, you're not going to kill them, but you will instantly destroy most of their ability to cloak and will cause them to flee very quickly, because that is something that they cannot lose, or they're instinctually programmed to avoid.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. Now,
excuse me for a second.
Yeah.
I just had to cough. Sorry about that, everyone.
Now, we, you and I had discussed a couple of different things. You have, as you just shared, you've had a couple of different encounters with different creatures. And you are going to share them eventually, or some eventually, with us. We kind of wanted to talk about a little bit about what the pull-off was and some of the camouflage stuff that kind of goes with these entities, as well as the Dogman and Bigfoot. Interesting thing that I had heard, and I don't know if I had brought it up with you, and this actually, it kind of validates, or not kind of, but for me, validates what you're saying, is, and I've got to find the paperwork, there's a Russian scientist, and I shared this with you, I believe it was in the 60s, it could have been a little after the 60s, but she was kind of looking at Bigfoot. She was looking at Bigfoot for the camouflage. She was studying it. She wasn't sponsored by the government. The Russian government didn't fund scientific research programs. And then when they found out what she was invested in and what she was dedicating her knowledge to, the Russian government still didn't dedicate any money to her, but they pretty much went along with her on her investigations, and they were searching these cloaking abilities for soldiers. And if we had the ability to make, let's say, exoskeletons for our soldiers that had these cloaking abilities, they would be near impossible to kill.
It would be a game changer and a very difficult thing to counter. Yeah.
I found that very interesting that I had read that, a couple years ago. And when you and I were talking about it last time we had talked, I believe I brought that up to you about the Russian scientist, and it really amazed me, because you read something and you take it for what it's worth, and then here comes you a couple years later, and you're actually validating what I read, kind of, and it's very interesting that happened that way. It blows my mind. So these caniform ones and the bear ones are able to camouflage as well. Are they as good as the pull-off ones, the version of the ones that are like the rake or whatever?
If you compare the two, yes, the pull-offs are abject perfectionist with that sort of ability. One of the more interesting things that I have found, and I think a lot of other people have observed, is that every single Dogman, all Bearman, Cat, Bat, whatever, they all are very different and all manifest very, very different abilities, but they do have a general sweep and behavior pattern, which is interesting. But it's obvious either, I hate going here, but either they manifest in and they're different, or there seems to be a very isolationist clustering and breeding sort of situations where we don't see much intermixing of traits, because you can look at Dogman in Oklahoma, you can look at Dogman in North Carolina, or in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee there, and they all have some basal traits that are very recognizable, but every single one of them have a very different idiopathic, meaning unknown behavior pattern, even among their own grouping. And I have no explanation for that, but I have learned to never believe the template I know is perfect to what I am dealing with. There are too many variables. And so what we were just talking about, Van der Waals forces, obviously, in my opinion, the one going up the tree at Jody's place was using Van der Waals effect, where the one in Montana obviously didn't have it. So every one of these creatures seems to have a selection from a large grab bag of tricks that do occur in nature and are quite explainable. The unexplainable part is how they all got into that creature and how they keep propagating. But overall, I just find the assumption that this Dogman, we got this, and this, or this entity, and we got this, and this behavior, is going to get you severely hurt, or you'll fail to find it if you try to apply it to another one that looks similar. And with the pull-offs, I don't think they're reported very often because they're too damn good at what they do.
Yeah. You don't really hear too much about any, rake, and I hate that term because it's a creepy pasta, but they're a crawler, I guess. Well, you don't hear too many accounts of, the crawler kind of peering at somebody and almost scaring them, like Bigfoot or Dogman. They almost take like a pride in scaring people. In these crawlers, they're there 1 second, gone the next. It's almost like an unlucky but lucky glimpse of these things. It's very strange. Now,
yeah.
One thing I want to ask, I got two kind of things that I'd want to ask. One is about the case in Canada that you shared with us.
Okay.
You had mentioned the blue hole. I obviously had interviewed Jody last night, and he and I were talking about it. He had asked me, was it a lake? Was it kind of, was it some sort of, because he kind of thought maybe it was, he felt that it was a demon, that possibly had, like a Native American demon, something that came from this blue hole. The blue hole, is it a lake? What is that area? What is the... it's a stranded mountain lake, meaning as you go down the hillside, a glacier had scooped out a small basin, and by small I mean about 100 feet across, maybe about 20 feet at the bottom, that had silted up and now holds water, and the water is crystalline blue. So it's called the blue hole, but everybody avoids it because it was considered a place of bad luck, and quite a few people had drowned there, and there's no fish. So that just kind of got bad mojo after a while. And that thing was less than a half a mile from the squirt box. So that is where the family of the individual that passed afterwards by his own hand, they claimed it came from there. Okay.
I've been outside of that zone and talked to other indigenous, and while they have their stories, they don't have anything that matches the experience in that area. So I wonder if that's pretty highly localized. I mean, to me, it seems to be.
Yeah, it does, because the way, I sat there for a while trying to figure out what exactly it was, and I looked at some cases, and I did some, looking into other cryptid accounts, and I have not come across another kind of account with some sort of creature like that, you know, and it's very strange. So yeah, it does seem like it's localized to that area. Maybe it can't travel or whatever, or maybe it just doesn't want to travel, or like you had said.
Or if it acts, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. What were you gonna say?
Oh, I was going to say, or if it acts the way it did, it would not be on a survival metric for very long.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe you had said that the locals that you had spoke to said that it had been a very long time since anyone has seen or heard of a creature like that. So maybe it only comes out of this portal or alternate dimension once a great while. And I'm kind of with you on it. You know, you and I had talked, and you kind of feel like it came from somewhere other than not outer space, but an alternate dimension. And I'm kind of with you on it because of the way you described the body structure, the everything was just foreign, and you know, it's just not of Earth, you know, but of Earth, obviously, which is.
I mean, one of the guys posited that it could actually have been a slip of something that had developed in an alternate path and happened to end up here. So maybe that was evolution manifested in a cyhedral chain of events that didn't happen for us but happened for it, leading to its construction. I have a hard time thinking it was actually manufactured or made. I mean, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but just my instinct of it and how it acted and how it lasted. And I hate going here on this stuff because, you know, the portals and all this other stuff. But I mean, They've proved that there is actually cyhedrally existent matter and manifestation. And, you know, there's actual scientific work and good math demonstrating a lot of these things. We can't achieve them in controlled environments other than in very specialized places, but that doesn't mean that they don't happen. I mean, we have this super collider, and it can produce and change bosonic matter into fermionic matter, and that takes a huge amount of energy and massive amounts of whenever a cosmic ray, which is just a general name for any high-speed sort of particle, hits Earth. And because a lot of these will pass through Earth, and they never even touch an atom. That's how small they are. But if they do intersect an atom, there is a small manifestation of these particles turning from energy into matter and then decaying away over time. So, and this happens 10,000 times a day on the Earth, which actually, and each one of these yields actually exceeds that of the super collider by a factor of hundreds to thousands. And so we have this phenomena. Sure, maybe a version of that phenomena happens here in a much more controlled manner that doesn't cause things to bleed off. Maybe these things become persistent. Maybe that's why they suddenly appear. That is pretty much strictly conjecture from some scientists I have actually worked with and are good friends of mine. But I mean, I don't know. And I think it's being researched so furiously because that does offer an amazing amount of technology. If we could actually figure out how to, in a controlled manner, convert energy back to matter instead of just making matter energy in a giant nuke explosion. So I really think that's why there's a lot of governmental interest in that. And I feel it's less to keep the public in the dark and more for a development system getting ahead of everybody, because if anybody figures that out, they'll be way ahead of the game. But I also feel uncomfortable going here with this statement because that is so outside the purview of normal, but unlike many of the other theories, it actually has a basis. So
yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I had literally sat there for a while, and you know, I believe that there is alternate life elsewhere on, you know, in the universe. I really do, but I'd have to be kind of dumb to think that Earth is the only inhabitable planet, but because it's so vast. But then I sat here and I was like, well, I started to think about things that, the elders or the locals had said that, it'd been X amount of years, a very long time since they've seen one. And then I was like, well, maybe almost like The Thing, something came from and was kind of frozen in this area. But then I was like thinking about how and what did the locals do when the first one came, or was this that same one?
Well, I hadn't thought about that. That's a really interesting idea. Yeah, to me it makes no sense because they wouldn't be able to light it up, take it down, or
Yeah.
I mean, some of the creatures have shown really high vulnerability to bismuth munitions, which is paramagnetic and actually has a half-life, but the half-life is like multiple trillions of years, so that shouldn't have an immediate effect. But bismuth, when it hits an electrical charge, actually is paramagnetic, meaning it makes a repulsive charge as opposed to diamagnetic like iron, which would actually have a attractive charge. So I don't know the mechanics of why bismuth ammunition works so well, and is what I usually carry in almost everything that I do. But and obviously fire for the ones that seem to have more of a desire for stealth, because it disrupts the whole photophore or chromatophore fiber optic fibril sort of cloaking system. But I wonder if something like this is a closed loop system that manifested and can only last for so long before it just stops functioning. I mean, but that is straight conjecture, and I will admit to you and other people listening that I'm uncomfortable in this territory because I do like dealing with more grounded facts. I know that sounds kind of funny in this situation, but I can biologically explain, experience, and reference many of the events with other than normal creatures and events. But the manifestation part, I am clueless about. I mean, I think I have some pretty good knowledge and I've extrapolated some pretty good points, but that's way out of my ballpark. I know some people perceive me as intelligent, but I've met people who have made me look very basic. So yeah, I don't know where to go on that.
Yeah, it's a very strange. That one had me baffled, and I had, after hearing it from you, recording it, re-listening to it, sat there and just, it was almost like my brain was just flooded with theories. I was trying to come up with a theory on what it was, how it was dealt with, where did it come from, and it was it gave me a headache.
Yeah, I could see that.
But now the last kind of thing I wanted to bring up, I said I had two things. When you, and like I had said previously, or that you've experienced a couple different experiences with creatures, and eventually you will come back and share them, hopefully. When you have been on your contracts, now you're not going out hunting these things. That's another thing that I wanted to clarify. You didn't hunt this
Yes.
thing. This was something that you got called into, by chance happened to come across. So when you are on your contracts, and you have encountered something out there, have you come across the silence, the just utter quietness in the woods, where the woods just go, or the surrounding area where you are just goes completely silent?
Yes, I've heard that described many times, and I've experienced that from childhood to present day, and that's not pleasant. parts of where I live up here actually are usually dead silent just due to the altitude I am up here. So I regard it less now, but I do remember growing up in the Tennessee Smoky Mountains there. When the silence hit, that's just always been kind of a thing as kids we knew. And I've experienced that in the Medicine Bow Range in Wyoming, just recreationally hanging around there. In between Laramie and Cheyenne, there's a place called Vida Vu, which is spelled Vida Wu, which directly translates to Playground of the Gods. And that's not the happy name you think it is. And boy, yeah, I got the silence hit a lot there. And that was just spooky as heck. In those areas growing up, I had some possible encounters and different things, but mostly I would have a hard time believing those at this point, but maybe I was encountering things and lucky. I won't disregard that. It's just the silence is odd. I've had it before when non-creature, basically humans or something, are coming in. If you listen to the terrain right, you'll see it go quiet when people are coming in, or directional move in the wildlife. So that can be human induced, but yeah, sometimes when you're by yourself in the middle of nowhere and it goes dead on you, yeah, that definitely will raise the monkey brain hackles inside of almost anybody that is situationally aware.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I was just curious because, like you had said, and I wanted people to know, first and foremost, definitely not a government contractor, and second, you weren't hunting this thing. It just happened, but periodically throughout your contracts, you encountered strange things, strange creatures, strange whatever. But I wanted to kind of ask if you had, during the process of, coming across these things, if the silence was present with them as well, that we do here. So yeah, that's pretty much my brain just went shut off. Anyway,
well, it's okay. You and I are a little slow today compared to last time. I understand.
Yeah, but I just wanted to make sure, because you hear and that one creature that you encountered. I've got so many questions that can't be answered, and I can't, my brain is just going to ask questions, it's just,
oh, yeah.
I'm curious, okay, here's, and I know I said last question, but.
Oh, no, have fun. Go ahead.
When you guys engaged the creature, what was there kind of like an aura in the air? Was there just, you've been in multiple shootouts or whatever, firefights.
Yeah.
Was there something different with this kind of area, or not area?
In this area, up to that point, no. I truly thought we were dealing with a giant bear. And I said Kodiak, but one guy put it out in the comments, and thank you very much. I didn't know this, believe it or not. And Kodiaks are only to Kodiak Island, so I've never known the difference. So I just assumed something big was that. But, I'm still thinking we're going to a bear, and I really thought we were dealing with something I've just never seen a big bear up in Canada, so I figured they'd be massive compared to a Wyoming grizzly. And so I didn't really put it together, and we were just focused in moving really fast. And, when we got there, we just dumped out and expected to put this thing down. And so I have to admit that we were not engaged in that sort of sensory situation and when we were moving slowly down on the river road, we're just moving around and looking for stuff. You got the Land Rover running and, jawing between each other, moving along the road, walking on the side. So, I have to admit that I can't say whether or not it was silent or quiet. We weren't infilling or exfilling, and, your ears and situational awareness aren't tuned to what that event was. So I must admit some obliviousness on that, just due to not being aware of it, but I have experienced the silence and other effects. One thing I think would be good to share with the viewers, we talked about this, is quite a few people who become lost and are retrieved have reported the feeling of deja vu that did not apply, but they were so compelled of believing that they had been to this point before, it drew them or made them think that they knew where they were going. And I haven't seen this reported in any of the, I guess, publicized or different channel stuff, but some of the people I've talked to and some other contractors have been affected by it themselves. Actually, we all know that deja vu is a danger sign because there's some sort of effect that can happen. And if you feel it puts your guard down, it causes you to wander off, maybe even ignore silence. But that's a very interesting artifact that I have not seen manifested in any information. I do think that's important to share so people at least have that in their head if they go out in the woods. Right. If you get deja vu, stop what you're doing and get the hell out of there.
Yeah, that's definitely a very interesting aspect to look at, because you don't really think of that. And I've just recently, since you had said that to me, started thinking about that yeah, deja vu is hey, I've been on this trail before, and no, you haven't, and then you're lost or whatever, and it's almost like something is luring you into that area, possibly by using mental manipulation or whatever it is, whatever you want to call it.
Oh yeah, I mean, that could be achieved by pheromones or semi-ammones, signal chemicals of some sort. Or, I mean, they're very powerful and act on basal reactions and instincts. So, I mean, a tailored pheromone or semi-ammone chemical sort of exposure can cause that. I mean, Alzheimer's causes and it happens in salmon. That's how they navigate back to their home spawning ground, is when they're in the ocean, their mind literally decays into an Alzheimer's state. And the only thing they can think about and remember is where they started, in the spawning waters. And that's how they navigate back, and that's why they die after spawning. In fact, 2008, there was a great amount of research done using salmon for Alzheimer's medication, and great many advancements because of that, because instead of watching somebody decay as a human test subject over like 10, 20 years, they could make salmon trigger into that state and watch the degradation of the brain and plaque formation. And so it's very interesting to think that Alzheimer's may just be an accidental leftover from our more aquatic stage of evolution, as a guidance point that sometimes manifests now as a disorder because it's no longer applicable to us. So if we can induce that by chemical states and cause somebody to actually not remember anything except to wander about. And you'll see that in Alzheimer's patients. They'll try to go back to their old home and different things like that. So there is ways to, through chemical damage as well as hazardous material exposures, which can cause that same sort of brain damage and plaque formation at a relatively rapid rate in days and weeks instead of like course of decades. They're definitely something tailored could induce the ability or affect the brain in such a way that it would cause a person to wonder, and it would not actually seem abnormal. And if they're retrieved, that could also explain part of their lack of clarity and understanding of where they've been. It might not be a persistent effect like the actual disorder itself, but it could emulate it chemically.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we don't know anything about these entities that you and I have been talking about and what my channel is based on, and there's so many different avenues to explore. And I'm glad I'm glad that I was able to. I'm glad that you reached out to me, because you're showing me and everyone else that there is different avenues out there. You really don't think about the deja vu aspect. I haven't, and I'll admit that I haven't. And who knows, like these missing people that have gone missing and then reappear with amnesia. It's just, and not hurt, but just found, and they have no idea where they've been, what happened to them.
Yeah.
So,
some of them have profound dissociation for an extended period of time after that event too.
yeah. And, and I'm going to say it, we're coming up on time, but I'm going to say it one more time.
Oh, yeah.
And hopefully you do come back and share some of your other experiences with us, but, you have dealt with these through, these kind of terms, or like the amnesia factor. You had explained something to me, and it's kind of funny that Steph and I came to an agreement. I don't know any of his experiences. We're gonna, if he does come back and share, that's the first time I'll hear, so I have the wow factor just like everyone else. But you've dealt with some of these things that have caused the amnesia factor. Obviously, now you're talking about the deja vu factor. So there's all these different things that we're not looking at, that we're just, taking, not for granted, but they're not even in our mind. We're just thinking, these things are here and they just do this. But there's other avenues to explore. There's so much that we don't look at. And I find it fascinating, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing your information with us. It really is a benefit, because it helps broaden the theory on what these things and what they are, what they're capable of. And I don't think we'll ever have an answer. If we do, it'll be probably after my lifetime, but it makes it, I hate saying this word, but it makes it a little more fun to have a more bigger kind of theory, bigger playing field to play with, and figure out more about these creatures.
And I like sharing this information in particular because I'm not asking people to believe me or actually repost it, but if they will incorporate what I've said into what they've experienced or what they go out to hunt for, I am not asking the unbelievable. All this stuff can be studied, and in that study, you are going to quite possibly find other factors that I am unaware of that could actually help other people. My main reason for sharing is actually to put at least some foundational knowledge that is provable or observable that can actually be applied to many of the encounters that people have been having. So it's not a matter of believe me or not. It's a matter of please take this information and study it and see how it applies to your encounters and events. It is, in my opinion, I have something to offer that is helpful and actually has some foundation in reality, and it takes the mysticism out of the whole system. And sure, there's a lot of crazy stuff we did talk about, but all the abilities and very manifest powers that these things demonstrate do occur in nature. It's just they don't occur in other things like them in nature, but they are possible. How they get here and how they develop, I don't know. But these are observable effects that could be applied to many cases. And I would think it would be helpful for people to apply that to their own experiences that they have had, so that they aren't as fearful, or they at least understand how such a phenomena could occur. And if people do encounter or do go actively looking for these things, you have some protocols you can develop and further explore what I have said in a way that is actually findable on just general information or things to look at. So that's my intent. And I'm glad Jeff said we're at time. I'm actually my head is hurting really bad. So I am sorry I wasn't as quick with the information and as cohesive in everything we've been saying. So, but I think it was worth it, and I have no regrets. So, all right, Jeff, I'm done.
All right. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. And I hope to talk to you very soon.
Cool.
Well, there you have it, folks. Tonight's second half for this 4th of July Guys, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Steph pops in on Saturday night live streams. I'm going to get in touch with him this week and get him back on the show. Super nice guy, super smart guy, and always have a great time interviewing him. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. So with that being said, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, friends. These creatures and scenarios are real. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the answers, and God bless.